Welcome to Nifty 50 Photographers, and in today's video I'm going to go through how to set up the Sony A7RV to make a time-lapse video. Now there's a couple of things you need to think about before you start making your video, and let's talk about image quality and particularly image size. So video is usually played back at 25 frames a second or 30 frames a second. For every second of video that means you're going to need 25 stills. That's basically what a time-lapse is stills put together to make a video. So as you can imagine, if you want 10 seconds of video, you're up to 250 stills. You're starting to need quite a bit of storage space. And when you come to process it, you're going to need a decent computer to process all those files, particularly if you make them very large. So what I tend to do is I like to shoot RAW if I can, because that gives me the option to adjust things like the exposure and make the shot look how I want. But I always set it to lossless compressed and the smallest file size, so I can try and keep my file sizes down. I definitely wouldn't go to RAW uncompressed because you'll get huge files and the whole process will be quite painful for you to manage. You can even shoot high quality JPEGs or the HEIC format as well, if you want to keep your file sizes down to something reasonable. So that's one thing. The second thing you should do, and hands up, I forgot to do this when I made the time lapse that you'll see in a few moments in this video, is set your aspect ratio to 16:9 because that's the format of videos. Right, let's get into the camera settings. Okay, the first thing you want to do is go into the menu function, go down to that third menu, the one with the little pictogram of a camera on it, and choose option number 5. That's the drive mode menu. When you get to that, go down to the third menu, which is the interval shoot function. Set that to on. Now the next thing you'll come across is shooting start timer. Basically that's a delay before the camera takes its first shot. You will need to set your camera up on a tripod, and if you want to avoid any camera shake, I would set that to 2 seconds. So the next thing you want to set is the interval. Now that's the interval between shots. So I'm going to make a time-lapse video of the clouds moving across the sky. It's quite a windy day today. They're moving quite quickly. So I'm going to set that to 3 seconds. Typically for things like clouds moving, you want somewhere between 1 and 5 seconds, just depending on how fast they move. But I'm going to try 3, see how it works for today's little clip. The next option you get on the menu is the number of shots. For my 10-second clip today, I'm going to need 250 shots. But my best piece of advice for you is set it to a number that is higher than 250. Because trust me, something always unexpected happens when you're filming time-lapse. And if you've got that option to go longer, it'll save you if you've got a problem during the shooting. So I'm going to set that to 330 to give me some extra shots to play with. You'll see in the bottom of the screen it tells you how long it'll take to shoot that sequence. So it's good to know when you set it going how long it's going to take before the entire sequence is done. Okay, the next thing on the menu is this thing called AE tracking sensitivity, and that's how sensitive the camera is to changes in exposure in the scene that you're shooting. If you set that to low, it'll change its automatic exposure when it sees low changes in exposure. If you set it to high, it'll only change when there's been a dramatic change in exposure. So, or you can set it to mid. Now I prefer to use low because I want it to change its exposure and track that as accurately as it can. If you scroll down, there are a couple of other menu options. One is shutter type in interval. So basically, are you going to use the mechanical or the electronic shutter? Personally, I'd go for the electronic shutter unless you're using a flash or something where you need to have the mechanical turned on, just because it saves shutter count and wear on your shutter. And the last thing is the thing called shutter interval priority. Now this really only becomes an issue when you're shooting in low light or nighttime time lapses. What is going to happen is if you need a 5-second exposure, for example, but you set your interval as 3 seconds, clearly your exposure time is longer than the interval. So what is the camera going to do? It's going to shut down after 3 seconds, start the next exposure, consequently your shot will be underexposed. If you set the shutter interval priority to on, what it'll prioritize is getting the exposure right. So it will take, for example, 5 seconds of exposure before it takes the next shot. Today it's a bright sunny day. I'm probably going to be at, you know, a 2/50th or 500th of a second, so it's not an issue for me to worry about with the 3-second time interval. But that's something to bear in mind if you're doing nighttime time lapses. So that's all you need to do. Go out, set up your camera. Now, one bit of advice I'll give you is, if you're looking for something like moving clouds, you need to have a static foreground so that you've got something for them to reference again. So I'm going to set this up here on this bench just to add a bit of interest to the clip. I'm going to sit on it in a couple of different positions. I can guarantee you probably somebody will walk by or walk through the shot, but it doesn't really matter for this video. But that might just add a little bit of interest. So here's my finished clip after I've put it through Premiere Pro. And I hope you enjoy it. Now, if you're struggling with time-lapse photography and want to go into it in more detail, I'll link to a video, I can never remember where that is on the screen, up here somewhere, that goes into detail of how to create a time-lapse video. And in the meantime, go out and try and make your own time-lapse. It can be a lot of fun speeding up those slow processes. They can be very eye-catching, great for things like social media. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.